Hey, boys and girls, this is my ninth attempt to start this video. I keep screwing it up. So we've got Brian with us again, marketing manager with Seaguar, who we've done a couple of videos with in the past. And I specifically reached out with questions you guys had from our first set of videos to schedule this call. So Brian, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So a couple of things, and the first one I want to tackle because it was my main reason in wanting to talk to you. There is so much, and today mostly we're going to talk about fluorocarbon, but we're going to talk a little bit about you. You've educated me on our little conversation before this call about braid, some stuff that I didn't know about. So what I was curious about was there's a lot of belief in the industry or in the fishing world about how to store fluorocarbon. And I ask you some specific questions. So talk to our guys. You've talked to your folks in Japan, right?
That's correct.
So tell us what we need to know about storing our fluorocarbon line.
So I hear all kinds of things. And one of the things that you specifically asked was about storing fluorocarbon fishing line in a refrigerator. And I'll have to say that was the first time I've heard that. But I took all the questions that you had and I sent it to our friends in Japan where the manufacturing is done and research and development is done, and got answers to those questions. One thing with fluorocarbon is it's UV resistant. So with that, you can store it, or you don't want to store it in direct sunlight. Obviously, if you're out there fishing all day, that's not going to alter the line. But if you're storing a big bulk spool of fluorocarbon that you plan to reuse over the next 2 years, something like that, go ahead and store it in your house, in a garage, or basement, closet that is pretty constant in temperature. It doesn't get really cold and it doesn't get really hot. And also it's out of sunlight, the direct sunlight. So anything, under 100 degrees, but, above 40 degrees. So your household climate is perfect. It stays at a pretty consistent humidity and consistent temperature with not much fluctuation, and you don't have the sunlight hitting it directly.
So that's bad news for my wife, Sarah. So we'll be moving the fishing line from the refrigerator into the wine refrigerator, which is 52 degrees and a steady humidity. Is that correct?
That's correct, but I don't know. I don't know what's more important, the wine or the fluorocarbon.
It rhymes, so
Yeah.
and we have discovered that in our house red wine creates small boys, so we're really careful with that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so refrigerator, that's a myth. It's too cold.
It's too cold from what they said, yes.
Okay, and I hadn't thought about this till now. I would assume pretty much everything to some degree expands and contracts in heat versus cold. You would think that's probably the case with fluorocarbon line as well.
Absolutely.
So you don't want it going through that process as much as you can stop it from happening. So like you said, kind of a constant temperature all the time.
Correct. Correct.
And you also said something that surprised me. So look, fluorocarbon line is not cheap. And the best way to buy it is bulk spools. I mean, I pretty much buy 1,000-yard spools whenever I buy my fluorocarbon line. And a 1,000-yard spool will normally last me, according to how much I'm fishing, 6 months to a year. So I'm storing that line for long periods of time. By the way, I just cut something out there because I absolutely lost my train of thought and Brian reminded me. So you surprised me with what the shelf life is for fluorocarbon line stored properly.
Yeah, we give it roughly a 7-year shelf life.
So you
Now,
keep it, yeah.
yeah, now I hope you're not letting it last that long. I hope you're out there fishing more and using the product. That just makes better experiences, better memories, more fun.
We stopped at 2 kids, so we're back to fishing now. So no, it's not going to last 7 years. But I mean, I've got spools that are, like I don't use 12-pound line. So I bought a 1,000-yard spool, 12-pound line, probably 18 months ago. That I probably would look at and say, okay, is that still good line? But it's stored in a closet in the world headquarters in Zavala, so I assume it's still in really good shape.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right. So there was another question, and I want to talk a little bit more. You educated me a little bit more about the different types of lines. One of the questions I had was somebody had experienced more breakoffs with one line versus the other line. And you said that probably isn't a line issue. Often it might be an angular error issue. And by the way, what I have discovered is I always break rods where I have whacked them on the gunnel, and then I break line where I have a bad eye. I'm amazed how often when I break line on a rod, I discover it's a bad eye. But you had an interesting experience with a pro angler tying a knot one time. Would you share that with us?
Absolutely. So this was several years ago, and I've grown up fishing all my life, so I'm used to going fishing and used to tying clinch knots and polymer knots. But happened to be out fishing with Denny Brower. Fortunate enough to fish with him. He's on the Seaguar pro staff and has been on the pro team for a long, long time. This guy knows more about fishing than I will ever know, and how he analyzes every single detail. We happened to be out fishing and we were fishing with jigs. And I was using all of this equipment. I'd flown out to Texas and we were fishing. So I'm out there fishing and I got hung up or something and I retied a jig. And we went and moved spots and I laid the rod down and he happened to pick up the rod that I'd been using. And when he went to fish, he looked down at the jig and asked me, he goes, did you tie this knot on here? And I said, yes, I did. And he goes, that's no good. And it was a polymer knot that I tied. And apparently when I was tying the knot, I managed to cross the line so that they were kind of crossed over each other like that when they were cinched down, not nice and neat. And that can cause the line to cut into itself and break off at the knot. And he, educated me on it and then retied the knot.
So guys, I thought about this a lot after Brian shared that with me. If you think about it, when you do a polymer knot, it's two lines tied back to itself, right? And what you're saying is they crossed so that as opposed to having two sets of lines with double surfaces against each other, you had one line, and
Exactly.
that created something that cut that. And as you said, I mean,
could cut it, yes.
Yeah, and Denny has forgotten more about fishing and line and breaking. I mean, he's probably broken more fish off in his life than I've caught. I mean, yeah, he fishes that much, still fishes that much. So
absolutely.
That's something, by the way, thanks for giving me one more thing to worry about in the boat, but that's something I'm really going to start paying attention to when I tie those knots.
Yeah. And when it comes to line break off, I mean, there's so many things that can happen when you're fishing and with your line that you may or may not be aware of. And things do happen in manufacturing, and yes, there's always a possibility it's the line, but majority of the time when we have a complaint and we test it and look at it, it comes back fine. And we at our warehouse we'll collect samples of line and hand them out to certain people, and they'll fish with them and they'll be like, we don't have a problem with it.
Yeah, and so I also ask you a question, or maybe you volunteered the question to me, which I find really interesting. So I mean, I don't know how many there are. There's 30, 50 pros in the country that are on Seaguar's team that basically call and say, I need line, and you send them line, right?
Essentially, yes. They do have budgets that they have to
Sure.
adhere to, because we can't just give them endless amounts of product. But yeah.
Other than Denny Brower. Denny Brower calls and you just send a truck to Denny Brower.
Exactly.
What's the favorite of those guys? The guys who aren't as worried about price point, what are they getting from you guys?
Tatsu.
Really?
Tatsu. It's by far a huge favorite. The pros, they claim that they can cast further with it, and they also feel that it lasts longer.
And then what would be second amongst that group of guys?
Invisex.
Okay. So that would be 1, 2. But you also mentioned you've got a handful of guys that really like Red Label.
Absolutely. Red Label is readily available, and it is tough as nails, so to speak. And when you're fishing for money and you don't want to have any issue losing a fish, if you're fishing 15-pound test and throwing it up against wood or riprap or whatever, and you just want something incredibly strong and you don't care about suppleness or premium performance, Red Label, there's a few guys that absolutely love it. And most recently Will Davis Jr. just won an elite tournament on Gunnersville using Red Label. and I was reading an article on it, and then they asked why red label, and his answer was simply because it's never let me down. That's
A
the
lot of
kind of
this is
following.
confidence. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot. I mean, yeah, that's what it boils down to.
I got some of the basics last year,
Hmm.
and I will admit I've not used it in a tournament setting, but I've fished with it a lot. I've had no failures. I've had no issue with that line, and it's a line that's kind of the same cost as some other non 100% fluorocarbon lines.
That's correct. That's correct. And that's one thing with Seaguar, we kind of came into the market of fishing line backwards. We were a premium, very expensive, uh, innovative line that people weren't familiar with, and they started buying it and learning the benefits of it. So we kind of grew our market from the top down, so to speak. So BaseX is really designed as 100% fluorocarbon for use on a spinning reel or casting reel, to people that are new to fishing or new to fluorocarbon. It also is at the same price point as other fishing lines in the marketplace that are fluorocarbon coated. And fluorocarbon coated and 100% fluorocarbon are two different things. You don't get the same results. 100% fluorocarbon, you get the virtual invisibility underwater. You get the better abrasion resistant. It sinks. UV resistant, impervious. It doesn't absorb water and start deteriorating. Those key benefits.
It's my channel, so I can say this. My first experience with fluorocarbon line was a coated fluorocarbon line, and I'm not going to say what brand it was, but what I will tell you is basically every fish that I tried to set the hook on vanished.
That's not good.
Just saying, that's what happened.
Yeah.
So had it not been for me discovering 100% fluorocarbon line not long after that, which basically one of my friends said, "You're buying the wrong stuff. Try this." It would have been a long time before I would have been an adopter. So now
Yeah.
the other thing we talked about, because I've had this and I've used it and I've not used it, is line treatments.
Mhm.
Talk a little bit
Absolutely.
about line treatments, and because a lot of guys who really love them.
Yeah. So this has kind of puzzled me, because again, fluorocarbon line is impervious, so it's not going to absorb anything. So I'm thinking from a scientific standpoint, why would spraying something on the line alter it, enhance it, make it better? And so that was one of the questions that we reached out to Japan, where our products are made, and asked them. And to my point, um, the fluorocarbon line is not going to absorb a line treatment. However, it will apply a coating to the line, which could or can enhance the performance, making it slicker, offering better casting distance, better handling of the line. So there is truth behind that.
And one of the other things we talked about, and I've had several questions about, with pretty much all fluorocarbon lines, you have coiling issues, right?
Mhm.
If you crank them, and by the way, guys, one of the things that I personally don't do when I put line on a reel that's going to sit up for a while, I don't crank it on real tight. I just reel it up where it's not just super tight on there. And I think that I don't have near the coiling issues I see other guys do. Now, that may also be that I fish probably more than some of the people do, but it doesn't sound like the coating is really going to help with the coiling issues. You just got to stretch your line on occasion when you haven't fished in a while.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. So those were my questions on fluorocarbon. Now you educated me a little bit. So I have always used a braided line where especially when I'm flipping, I like to take a black magic marker or marks a lot and kind of go up and every quarter, half inch, put a slot on there to make that line camouflage. I don't have to do that anymore, right?
Well, you can just use our camouflage tactics braided line.
So that's a new offering.
It's relatively new, yes.
So talk a little bit about that line and the difference between that line and our other freshwater braid line.
So Tactex is one of our newer products. It is a 4-strand braid that is greens, tans, and browns in color. The colors do not repeat, so it'll naturally kind of blend in with the environment for when you're using braided line. You can tie, if you're fishing muddy water, tie your lure, cut the braided line so that it's brown line showing, tie your line directly to it. Same thing with green, whatever watercolor you're fishing, just match that to where you tie your lure. Or if you're fishing fluorocarbon, Tactex is actually a braid fluorocarbon kit. We include a 5-yard fluorocarbon leader with every package sold, so that if you're needing fluorocarbon leader, it's already there for you.
And then our other braid is an 8-string.
Correct.
So there's a difference in how it's wound, right?
Yeah, so our 8-strand braid is smackdown, and each of the strands are going to be a little bit thinner, and it's woven very tight and it's very round. In doing so, it makes it slicker, smoother, so it's going to cast better and it's going to be quieter. The 4-strand braid, obviously, each individual strand is a little bit thicker, and it's not pulled quite as tight and isn't as smooth. So it'll be not necessarily noisy, but a little bit noisy compared to our 8-strand braid.
It's coarser.
Correct. And it's going to offer better abrasion resistant, because each one of those individual strands is thicker in diameter. When you want to talk about abrasion, there's it's directly related to diameter of the product. The thicker diameter is always going to win.
So said another way, if I'm going to go to Falcon and flipping boat arc trees, I might want to look towards the 4-strand.
Correct. Yeah, well, if you're fishing trees, you might want to use fluorocarbon because it's thicker diameter. You won't get snagged in a tree so much.
Yeah,
I would use heavy fluoro.
I know that you watch every one of my videos, Brian. But
absolutely,
one of the videos I've talked about it quite a bit. The year that Rayburn was so high, and we were flipping bushes that literally had 15 and 20 feet of water in them. And one of the things I discovered was my catch ratio was much higher flipping 25-pound fluorocarbon than it was flipping braid.
Absolutely.
And what I determined that was braid would saw into limbs versus sliding over a limb. So if I was really pulling a fish up and down, it would bite into that limb. And I found myself getting fish that just got buried in a limb that I couldn't get loose. A lot of times what I believe happened was I would cut a notch in that limb, and then I would stick that sinker into that notch. And those fish you couldn't catch. If they were 12 feet down, you weren't going to poke them free with the rod. Didn't have that experience with heavy fluorocarbon.
And the same token, as you were using the analogy, cutting into a tree, think about if you're fishing mats or grass, any type of weeds, fishing that 4-strand braid will kind of act as a serrated knife and cut into that, allowing you to work through it. So if you're fishing trees, wood, structure like that, fluorocarbon will tend to be better. When you're fishing grass like that, you need to cut through it, use a 4-strand braid.
Yeah, great point. I mean, the braid is just like running a weed eater through them. So you get a fish, way into the pads, it'll cut those pads, and you're a lot more bigger chance to recover the fish. Something just occurred to me. You and I talked about back to fluorocarbon. Sorry to jump topics, but I also asked you what most guys liked when they were using. What was the most common? So 2 things. Most everybody that's throwing spinning reels are throwing one of our light braids with a fluorocarbon leader, right?
Absolutely.
But then you made a comment. I asked you, is anybody still spooling pure fluorocarbon all the way through the spool? And you said yes. And explain why, because this makes a lot of sense to me.
So some applications, especially when you go further north, fishing for smallmouth, and a technique they do is they drag tubes. And a lot of times, you want to cast far out, and with fluorocarbon sinks, the line will sink kind of like how I'm showing my arm right now. It'll kind of go diagonally down to the bottom and lay flat, allowing you to have better contact with the bottom, have your tube have better contact with the bottom and catch more fish. With braid, it tends to float, and then it's going to sharply go down, so you don't have as good of contact with the bottom.
That's a really cool thought. I never would have considered that, but I don't do that style of fishing. So again, I think most of us use braid on the spool, but those guys who are using fluorocarbon all the way down, what's their most common fluorocarbon line they're using?
And Vizex or Tatsu.
So sort of the same stuff. Because
Yeah.
you said the red label really, and I would assume also the basics probably doesn't have the same character, suppleness character. I can't say that word.
Suppleness.
Suppleness
Flexibility.
characteristics. There you go. That you need to use on spinning.
Red label, there are people who do it. Personally, I do not like line memory on a spinning reel. So I would not personally recommend red label. And in fact, if you pick up our smaller 200-yard packages of product, on the side, it will have an icon showing you what it's good for. So if it's good for a bait casting reel,
Yep.
it'll just show a bait casting reel. And if it's good for a spinning reel, it'll show spinning reel, or it'll have both, or one or the other. Red label, it just shows casting. There are people who use it for spinning reels, don't get me wrong. But I'm not one of those guys. I would step up to Invisex and get something that's more supple and offer better performance. Basex, again, if you're a current Seaguar user, I wouldn't recommend Basex because it's kind of a step down from what you're already using. Basex is designed as an opening price point product to compete against monofilament or other lines that are, a monofilament line with a fluorocarbon coating that are not nearly the same. So I would suggest, if you're currently using Seaguar, to stay with what you're at, or step up to Invisex or Brazex, or give Tatsu a try if you haven't.
Well, and I mean, there is one obvious great market for Basex, because the worst thing you can do to any fluorocarbon line is a backlash, right? When you cinch that line and you put that tweak in it, that line's weak. And anybody who's ever taught a kid to fish, you're going to get backlashes.
Absolutely. That's,
so,
perfect idea for using Basex.
That's, my boys aren't quite to the point of learning, but when they do, it will not be with Tatsu. They will be learning mono first, and then they'll learn, basics, and then we'll move their way up.
It's got very strong reviews. Wired to Fish has reviewed it. You can look at the reviews and ratings on Amazon and other places, and it's got really great reviews for the product. So
yeah, for the price point, it's a great line.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. All right. Anything exciting coming down the pipe you can tell us about yet?
Not yet. not yet.
They're always working on stuff, guys.
I had to clean my desk off to make sure there wasn't anything.
You left the box behind you back there.
That's actually my chair. So
that's your chair.
We're all good.
King. That's the king's chair.
Yeah, if I have some reading material to do, I'll sometimes sit there and read up on stuff.
For years and years, when I stayed at the lake, I stayed at my buddy Dickie's house, and I hope John Gunnels sees this, because I saw John Gunnels sleep in an easy chair more than I've ever seen him be anywhere else. He would just sit down, beer in the hand, and 30 minutes later, he'd be gone. Yeah. So we just leave him there, get him up in the morning from the easy chair. So there's nothing wrong with a man in his easy chair.
Not at all. Not at all.
All right. Well, I think that's all our questions. If we have more, hopefully I haven't embarrassed either of us enough that you won't do this with us again.
I welcome to do it again, and welcome questions. Sometimes somebody will have a question that'll puzzle me or something, and look to get some direction from Japan to answer it correctly. So definitely welcome questions, and we can do it again.
Yeah, to that point, I really appreciate you chasing those down and getting the guys. I mean, look, there's no better person to ask about fluorocarbon than the guys who I see make the fluorocarbon.
Absolutely.
I've talked about this. I don't think you ever have, but there's a whole lot of resellers of fluorocarbon out there, right? People who are buying fluorocarbon from a fluorocarbon manufacturer and putting a label on it. You guys don't do that. You guys, I believe, didn't Seaguar design the very first fluorocarbon line?
We invented it back in 1971, so over 50 years ago. Wow. And we make our own resins and extrude it ourselves, and no other company can make that claim. And you can Google this information on the internet, but there's pretty much 3 companies who manufacture fluorocarbon, the raw PVDF material, and that is our parent company, Kreha. There's a company in China and a company in Germany. So technically speaking, we are the only true 100% Japanese fluorocarbon because our product is manufactured, the raw materials pulled there, and the products manufactured there. Everybody else is having to get their raw materials from another country.
So you have 100% quality control, top to bottom.
Correct.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's great stuff, and I certainly appreciate you guys continuing to support me and the channel.
Absolutely.
And if we have questions, guys, post them below, and I will make sure to get with Brian, and we'll get them answered either in the notes below the video, or we'll jump on another quick Zoom call and get you guys additional information. All right. Thanks, Brian, man. That's been great, and
Yeah.
we'll talk again soon.
Yeah, look forward to it. And let me know if you need anything or if there's anything I can do for you.